Alright guys, let's throw our asset into Unity just to start checking out the normal maps and occlusion map and seeing what that looks like. The first thing you should do is start Unity, and if you haven't started a new project for this work scene already, or if you're working in a project you already have, you can use that, but if you're starting a brand new one, open up Unity, you'll get this new projects window here, and create a new project, and save it wherever you want to save it, make it a 3D one, and under add asset packages, I have a lot, but you'll probably just have a few. So the ones I do recommend you add are characters, effects, and that's probably it. Now, what you can do eventually is add these cinematic image effects pre-release, or the regular cinematic image effects. Those are on the asset store. They're free from Unity. They will make your stuff look a lot better, and we will discuss those once we're kind of setting up our lighting and stuff like that. But I'll show you kind of how to get those. So hit done, and then create your project. If you already have one, then just open it up. So I have a project that I started here. Oh, you could ignore that. That's something else. So while that's opening and making itself in the background, we're going to go to 3D Max. Oh, was there? Sorry. And you could ignore that 3D Max thing. We're not going to go into 3D Max. So we have our Unity over here. I'm starting a brand new scene. First thing I'm going to do in my brand new scene is just throw a plane in here. Just so I have something to work off of. No big deal. I have my project view over here. Oh, Jesus, that's not what I wanted. All right, so over here, I'm going to create myself a new folder called, whatever. Environments. If I was going to make a whole new thing, I'll do props, and then meshes, and also textures. Now, most people are going to start exporting their stuff mesh first. What I like to do is I like to make sure that my textures are saved in the correct spot first. So I'm going to do right-click on my textures folder and show and explore, and this will just bring this guy up here. And I'm going to open up another guy. So let's just do images here, go to desktop, and select those two computers that I baked out. And I'm just going to hit Control X to copy or cut them and paste them into my textures folder. And go back to Unity, it'll import them. Don't have to worry about settings for now, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So they should be right here. Now we can go into 3D Max. And what we're going to do is I'm going to open up my material editor. I'm going to make a new material for this guy here, or use an existing one if I want. I'm actually going to name this, so I'm going to call it computer A, whatever, 01, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to swap out, I'm using the diffuse that I baked out before. I'm actually going to go in here and I'm going to select the texture right from my project view. So I'm going to go to, this computer, D, personal, modern class, project, blah, 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 blah. Environments, props, textures, and I'm just going to pick my occlusion for now. The reason I'm doing that is when I import this into Unity, it will make a material and it will find that texture and actually associate it properly. If I import my material mesh first and make a material, anytime I re-export that mesh or do some other stuff, it may not be properly associated with that texture, which is not cool. And I also like to work in Max from the targets that I'm actually using in my game. That way there's no confusion of which oh, am I using the one that's saved on the desktop, but then I have a different one in my project view? It's too messy for me, so always work out of your project view nice and clean. Once that is done, make sure your pivot is where you want it to be. For this instance, I don't really care. Name your mesh, whatever, computer 01. Go to File, Export Selected, and export this bad boy right into your project. So again, personal, class, project, did not name my project, environments, props, and I'm going to go into meshes and export it as computer 01. I'm going to export it as an FBX. Under FBX, I'm going to export my smoothing groups because I spent time making those guys. not going to bother turbo smooth. I'm not going to have it on there, but anyways. You can keep this stuff too, that's fine. Animation, I don't need animation for this guy because he is a static mesh. You can keep this cameras and lights on if you want. If you're doing export selected, it doesn't matter, but whatever. And I'm going to make sure embed media is not on. Some people have been exporting with this on, which is not cool for games, so do not do that. That should be fine as long as you have those guys on. That's good. You could export, do that, and go back to Unity. Let it import and do its little spinny thing. Bam. Under meshes, you'll have your mesh, and you can drag that in there. Now, you'll see here, by default, it has created a materials folder for me. Under that materials folder, it called it computer occlusion, which I don't particularly like. It used the texture name of it. If I go into my mesh here, under the import settings that it brings up, under import materials, you could do by texture name. You could do by models material, which I like, because then it will actually use the naming that you have. So you have this old one here, you can just delete that if you want. I like using the materials I set up in Max because that's how I like to work. And you see here, it already threw my occlusion as my albedo. Typically you will throw an albedo in there, so not perfect, but again, at least that texture is and material is associated with my mesh nicely. So let's take a look at it here, and let's set up this material a little bit better. So number one, I'm going to rotate this guy so he's actually facing my skylight, or my directional light. I'm going to move this directional light out of here just because it's a pain in the butt. And I'm going to duplicate this guy and just rotate him backwards so I could also see the back in pure lighting here. Okay, so that's looking not too shabby. So let's throw our normal maps on here. So I'm going to select this guy, and he has computer 1 material assigned, and the material is going to be over here. And the albedo is going to be using the occlusion right now, which is not something we're going to want in the future, but you can leave it in there for now if you like. The occlusion is going to go under occlusion map, which occlusion determines how your stuff is textured in the shadows and the darkness of areas and where things kind of should get less light and stuff like that. So you're going to throw that in there. We're going to throw our normal map into our normal. Now, the first time you do that, you may notice your stuff looks shitty. And with this selected here, you'll notice that under your normal map, there's a little thing saying, this texture is not marked as a normal map, fix now. Unity needs to compress our textures and kind of save them out as a specific thing. And a normal map needs to be properly imported as a normal. So it's going to ask you if it's going to fix that because it can actually detect what kind of texture it is. And you can just click Fix Now. And it'll fix itself and it will look much better. And that should be good. Now, with your textures, the last thing you may want to do is actually select them in your project scene here. And hopefully by default, it will pick the resolution that you have, so 2048, 2048. Make sure that, you know, if it's set to like 256, it will look like garbage, all muddy. So make sure this is set to whatever it is that it's supposed to be set. Now, for a game and stuff like that, you want it to be compressed because it'll be a little bit smaller. If you're going for a portfolio, you may want to go here and just go to True Color. Those would be a little bit crisper, a little bit nicer, which is, again, fine for portfolio reasons. All right, so this guy is looking pretty decent, I gotta say. And if you want, for now, you can play around with some of your material stuff, like how metallic is this object? And how shiny is this object? So this will determine how crisp that reflection is. So you can goof around with that if you want, no big deal. Now, if you really want to have some fun, you can go under Assets, Create, and or is it Component? I always forget Assets. Oh, actually, it's probably in your project view. If you imported your character stuff under Standard Assets, you can go to First Person Controller, go to Prefabs, and just grab a first-person controller in here. Now, I didn't really set up my scale for these monitors, or I didn't really think it through too much, but let's see what it looks like. So I'm going to throw that first-person controller prefab in there. I can hit play, And there we go. I should be able to run around this guy, see what he looks like. He has no collision, so you'll be able to just run right through him. But at least you'll be able to kind of walk around and take a look at how your stuff is looking. So your first job here, once you get your stuff into Unity, is to look for problems, because we don't want to move on to painting and doing other stuff if we feel there's any other issues. So let me just stop this right now. And issues I'm going to look for. Number one is this kind of garbage, this bubbling, garbage-looking smoothing group stuff over here. This is not very nice. So if I go back into 3D Max, I may notice that, you know, it's a little bit harder to catch right here. But I know that I have some smoothing group issues going on here. So maybe it doesn't like that this monitor is kind of sharing these smoothing groups with these big faces here. So what I may do is, you know, either select this whole thing and then just throw smooth on it, and then just kind of auto smooth it a little bit rougher. Right, and then re-export it. Go back to Unity. All right, that looks better. If it was still looking ugly, then I would think maybe I had a problem with my high poly, or that my low poly just did not have enough detail in here. That yeah, I can still kind of see it in here. I may want to fix that. You may want to go in your low poly, add a loop around here, and then rebake it. Same with this area here. I'm getting some really funky triangulation here. Probably just too much detail for this area, so I may want to go through and rebake some of that stuff. Oh, that's a good example here. We'll take a look at that in a second. But yeah, kind of do a once over of your mesh. You know, all this stuff should look nice and crisp and clean and fancy. You know, take a look at what this guy looks like. You know, if the resolution's okay for you. If you still feel this is too low, you know, you might want to go higher. So let's take a look at some of these issues. Number one here is, this is a really good example. I have some smoothing group errors here, so I may want to look in on that. These guys are just generally jaggy, so they just might need a higher resolution bake, or kind of take a look at the normal maps and you know, and unwraps and see what's going on in here. The rest of this looks pretty good. And this guy here, this is a fascinating little ditty here. Let's go in here and take our normal map and put it to 0. And you're like, hey, that looks fine. Why does it look all stupid when I put the normal map on? Well, that must mean that in your normal map, we are going to have some sort of problem. So it might be a little hard to find it in here if we don't know exactly what we're looking for. You may need to go back into Max and reference your UVs and try and figure out where stuff is. I believe I have found the culprit. It is this little triangle here, and I am seeing some really bad smoothing over here too. So I can try and clean this up with my fill brush or my content aware. Oh Jesus, that's not what I wanted. Cool, well that did a terrible job. I don't know where it's getting that noise from. What are you doing? Oh, I'm filling the floaters here. No wonder it doesn't make any sense. There we go. Now this will not always work for your normal maps. Sometimes normal maps are too complicated to do a content-aware fill. Sometimes you may need to go through and actually hand brush some of this stuff in, so I can start trying to fix it up here. Now let's take a look if I did a good job or if I did a horrendous job on this. Sometimes you will look into your Photoshop file and you're like, yeah, it looks pretty good, I guess. It's no big deal. So Targa, let me see if it actually remembered. Nope. Okay, so let's find this project. Personal, third modern class, projects. assets, oops, not standard assets, environments, props, textures. If you ever want to quickly access your stuff, you can right click on this and go to pin to quick access, which will be in here, because finding stuff is a pain in the butt. So computer normals, let's do that. Let's go back into Unity here. Oh, and I must have fixed the wrong side. There must have been a problem here on this side as well. So you can see here that's not looking very nice. My low poly is kind of garbage. This, oh geez, something terrible happened to this thing. So, you know, even though things looked fine in Photoshop and maybe even 3D Max, you know, we're going through here and we're starting to see some real actual issues. Now, if this was a small asset, nobody was really looking, I could probably get away with leaving some of these things, like what the hell is that? But really, if I want this to be a really good portfolio piece and not look like a pile of poop, I'm going to go through and fix all those things. So go through, try and get rid of as much of this bubbliness as you can. You know, a lot of that's probably fine with just smoothing groups. Like that looks a lot nicer too, but I will most likely rebake all of this again with a better low poly, which I know is a time-consuming process, but that's kind of just the shtick of it. Oh yeah, look at this crazy garbage here. That's terrible. So, you know, that's definitely going to need a rebake. I don't think I'm going to be able to buff this out with Photoshop. So, you know, as nice as things might look when you first get in there, there's usually a whole ton of problems that you just did not notice. Oh, hey, these things baked out kind of super well from far away, kind of terribly up close. So, should definitely look into what the heck is happening there. I do like them, but they're looking kind of stupid too. Yeah, those things did all right. Let's take a look at some of my floaters. We got some buttons. These things, they are just stretched. So maybe the UVs on that are messed up. You know, I got like a black dot up here. These guys turned out quite nice. Look, you get a little bit of lighting in there. That's nice. That's nice. Oh yeah, there's little bolts there, a little low res, but you know, from out here, that's not too shabby. So again, take a look, spend some time, get to know your mesh, you know, figure out what's good or bad, and then just rinse and repeat. Fix, clean, rebake, rebake until you hate everything about your mesh. And when you are ready, we will move on to painting up these bad boys. And as you can see, I mean, once we get rid of all the problems, this thing already looks pretty badass, right? Just with the details and the normal maps and all that. So probably not going to have to go too crazy on actually texturing these things, which is kind of what you want these days. You don't want to go too bananas on any of that. So clean your stuff up, make it nice and crisp and pretty, and we will move on from there. Thank you all.